certain people, or is that why would you come to that conclusion? Jesus said, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to who? Every creature, to all nations." So whenever you preach, he said that to his disciples. So what's a rebuttal that usually happens there? Since he said that to his disciples, is he saying that to you and I? Okay, but then once they do that, then what are the people they're teaching supposed to do with it? That's right. So now, Paul said to Timothy, "Teach faithful men who will teach others also." Jesus came to seek and to save the lost. If you understand why he came, why would he bother? Why would he leave and empty himself, come here, walk in our skin, and be treated the way he was treated and go through that? If you call yourself a Christian, you're following him, then you should care about what he cares about. You should want to help his cause. Now, everybody doesn't have the same ability. We understand that. But we all have hang-ups. We all have excuses. I have them too. Let me tell you this, that when I think about evangelizing, for years I called myself an evangelist. I sat at my desk because that's what I was taught. That was my comfort zone. I sat in my office, I studied. But what began to happen in my mind was, I'm reading through Acts and I'm reading what they did and how the gospel spread. And my conscience started bothering me. I thought I was doing what I was supposed to be doing as a preacher, studying in order to present lessons to the church. But I felt wrong that I wasn't sharing more. I wasn't going out and exposing the gospel to people who had not heard it. How many people have heard the gospel in simplicity as you and I would know it? And how are they going to know it if we don't do something in order to spread that? Now, not everyone is able to do the same thing. I get that. But we all can do something, what we are able to do. So when I'm talking about excuses for not evangelizing, I'm going to mention an example of something that happened to me. So I'll go a little first, and then I'll ask you, what are some of your hang-ups of why you don't try? So I'll give you a scenario. I was supposed to meet a man to have a Bible study. We were going to meet at a Burger King. So I'm at the Burger King, and he doesn't show up. So immediately, there's these thoughts that start going through my head. See, people aren't interested. There's a hang-up. Or, as I'm sitting there, I begin to notice that there's this group of kids sitting over towards the middle. And they're reading a book and discussing it. And the book, and I've noticed that the title is called The God Delusion. Has anybody ever heard of that book? It is it's a very antagonistic form of atheism is what the book is about. But mind you, I was in North Carolina where 80% of the population is Southern Baptist. 90 to 95% of the population believes something. So, Bible Belt, very rare to find someone who does not believe in God at all. So, this is a little different for me in some of the discussions that I would tend to have with some people. So, I'm thinking, here's an opportunity. My guy didn't show up for my Bible study that I was supposed to have with him. Here's a group of kids. They're reading a book. They're discussing it. So I'm thinking, here's an opportunity. Why not strike up a conversation with the kids since I'm already there? I chickened out. I go to my car, and I'm sitting in my car, and I'm getting ready to leave, and I think, why didn't I try to say something? So I said a prayer. I walked back in, and as I'm walking back into the Burger King, what's happening now is it's dawning on me, oh, what are you supposed to say? So my knees are knocking a little bit. I'm a little nervous. I have no idea how to strike up a conversation. So I'm thinking, okay, well, I just left, and now I'm coming back in. If I just walk straight in and then walk over to their table now, that just seems kind of awkward. So I try to act like I'm supposed to be there. So I walk up to the counter and I order a drink, which I really didn't need, but I did it just. Do you ever do things like this? Okay, so, or is it just me? Am I the only one that kind of feels like this? Or, but anyway, I get my drink and I'm fiddling with the straw. I'm thinking, what am I going to say? And I'm walking over. I still have no idea what I'm going to say to these group of kids. And I almost chickened out again. I was about to leave. And as I was thinking, they probably are not going to listen, or they're not interested in me saying something to them. So as I'm walking by, I finally just bit the bullet. And I said, hey, I noticed you were reading the God Delusion. What do you think about it? And then I shut up and I listened, and they talked about it a little bit, and then I said, well, would you like to get together sometime and discuss it? They said, yeah. Gave me the phone number. Look what I did to myself, though. I gave myself all these reasons not to even try. Now, it may not have went as well. I mean, maybe they could have said, beat it. I don't know. But what I'm trying to say is sometimes we get in our own way. We find all these reasons why something won't work, and we make all these excuses. You remember Jesus said in an example of a wedding that he made an invite to some. Some they made excuse, had various reasons why they couldn't come to this event. So then what does he tell them to do? And invite who? But sometimes we have so many excuses and hang-ups about who might be interested, who might not. We make judgments ahead of the time before we even know. Can you look at a person and tell whether or not they're going to be interested or not? What, by the way they look, by the way they dress? Can you tell? Those are not good indications of whether or not somebody may or may not be interested in talking about the gospel. So I gave you an example of like my hang up. What are some of your reasons why you don't try sometimes to, whether to invite someone to an occasion like this, or whether you invite someone into your home to discuss the scriptures, or somewhere else? What would be your reasons why you don't?
I have two.
Okay.
All right. And I've thought about this a lot, and I've found, excuse me, I'll try to keep this brief because I can ramble.
Me too.
But part of my job, my career job has taken on, for lack of a better term, sales. And I struggle with that in the same way I struggle with evangelism, although obviously evangelism is infinitely more important. But I've found a lot of parallels. And in both cases, I've found that two things are true for me personally. Number one, I know what I have. I don't want someone, and I know they're not rejecting me. I don't want them to reject
What do you sell?
We actually have an online curriculum for schools.
Okay.
And it's just a way for students that have maybe fallen behind in some of their coursework throughout their career, they can get caught up on. Um, and we're a very, very small service provider, and we're competing with literal national. And so you know how it is, a lot of people, you give them the choice between Heinz and Great Value, they're going to take Heinz because it's got to be better. We're the Great Value, okay? But I believe in what we have, and so it's like, just give us a shot. And it's the same way with evangelism. Give Jesus a shot. So that's the first thing, is I don't want them to reject what I know I have. The second thing is I'm afraid somebody will take me up on it, and I'm going to be exposed to not know what, they ask me that unanswerable question. Unanswerable in that conversation. Now, give me a day, I'll go read on it and study up on it and come back. And I'm in my Bible, and I say that not as a flex or to pat myself on the back, but you can't know everything. Or at least you can't, it doesn't mean just because you're putting the time in that you're going to know everything that you need to know when you're asked. So I'm also a privileged, talking to me about Christ, he can't even answer my questions. Those are the two biggest things for me, is I don't want them to reject what I know I have, and number two, I'm afraid of that. Let me get back to you on that. Let me get back to you on that. Well, I might get back to them, but in their mind, they're like, well, shouldn't you know that already? Those are the two biggest things that I personally struggle with, that keep me from maybe reaching out sometimes when I should.
Very good. In Exodus chapter 3, when God called Moses, go and to do what? What was God telling Moses to do? God speaks to him out of a bush and says to do what? To do what? In order to do that, how has he got to do that? Aha, the guy he ran from. Maybe, unless that one died and there's another one. But he's got to go ask the Pharaoh. And what does Moses say about this job? What's his reasons why this is probably, why he doesn't think he's the guy for the job? He's not a good speaker. I think there was a survey somewhere that people were asked like what their biggest fears were, and I think public speaking was higher on the list than fear of death. By the way, do you think that people who preach and teach, all of them never have some kind of a struggle in order to do that? You think they never get nervous, or they never once had to do their first sermon? I think I heard a story about Barton W. Stone. He ran out of the building in his first sermon, and then finally got mustered up the courage to come back in. But what about talking to people? If you ever find yourself nervous about talking to people, now some people, they've never met a stranger. There are people like that. But there are other people who have forced themselves. I have to force myself to talk to people. It would be more comfortable to not introduce the subject or try to say something, or you're worried about how you're going to be perceived. Will they reject me or reject what I believe? Verse 11, Exodus 3. Moses said unto God, who am I? What's the excuse? Think about Moses' upbringing. What's different between him and his people? Now, he's of the same race, but
He was the adopted son of Pharaoh's daughter.
Does Moses have some valid objections here with this idea? Okay. How was he perceived later when he actually, finally God is angry with him and he says, okay, he's going to do it. But was Moses right a little bit on how he felt he would be received? What were some of the reactions that he actually received?
He didn't know who sent him. And he asked and told him, the I am sent me. And, well, who's the I am? And they kind of things in perspective. Moses has to go talk to the most powerful man in the world at the time. All right?
Okay.
So when he goes there and he says, "Who are you? And who is the God that you serve? That I should let the people go. Get out of here." Hey,
So imagine you were raised as a slave. You were driven like an animal. You got to make production. You don't make the production. I don't think that they were gentle with them. It was harsh labor. There's a reason why the children of Israel cried out to God, "Deliver us." God heard their cry. He says, "I have seen the affliction of my people." So they are the ones who had that kind of life. Here's the one who was raised by Pharaoh's daughter in luxury and all of the amenities and education. So generally speaking, when someone has a hard life and they see someone that looks like they have a posh life, how do those people generally perceive the other people sometimes? Yeah, how can somebody in that environment understand someone in the more harsher environment? So there's already that. I think Moses has some valid points here. Who am I?
but at the same time, he's been a shepherd for 40 years. So he had changed.
That's right. Now, sometimes we over-exaggerate our inabilities. Whatever reason, God believed that Moses was the right guy for the job, but Moses himself did not believe he was the right guy for this job.
He said that he was not able to speak very well. And so he used that as an excuse. But God took care of that by choosing Aaron to speak.
Right. It is interesting. He's got to say it to Aaron. So he's speaking something. He's just not speaking to everyone like Aaron's going to be speaking to them. So he can say what God said to him. It's just a little different when you got to say it to a larger group, right?
I think it's human nature, at least for myself, to think I'm not the best at the job. There's somebody that's better than me. And Moses may have had a little bit of that, that I'm not the best person for the job. God don't want the best person. He just wants you.
Think of some of the people who've been instrumental in bringing souls to God who weren't always what you would expect them to be. There are some people who would hear an invitation from me because I say, okay, I this is my life, I preach. Okay? But there are other people who would hear it from someone who doesn't do that more than someone from me. Now, I don't need to use it as an excuse to say, well, I'm not going to try, because they might not listen to me because I'm a preacher. Nor should you allow that to stop you. I will give an example of when I was growing up, there was this older sister. She was single, never married. I think she was probably in her 70s or 80s at the time when I was really young. But I remember she lived in a little single-wide pink trailer. And she was shut in. She never could get out. My parents would ride by her trailer, get her grocery list, go to the grocery store, get her groceries for her. On Sunday mornings, we'd stop by her trailer. They'd pick up her check she would give, she wanted to give to the church. So they'd pick up her check, take it whenever. And she couldn't even come. She never came to a single service. But that woman did more evangelism out of her single-wide trailer, grading correspondence courses, talking to people, writing them letters. She did what she could. Here's someone who's not using any excuses to keep her from at least trying to do what she can. Don't underestimate what women can do in evangelism. That might be an excuse some might make. Who am I? Now, as I see it, in 1 Timothy 2, he says that women are not to teach or usurp authority over the man. All right, in 1 Corinthians 14, he mentions women to be silent in an assembly. Okay. Aside from that, though, those limitations, I don't see anything in Scripture that limits her to be able to spread the gospel, though. We do have women in Scripture who were very involved. John chapter 4 would be one, the woman at the well. And you know what she does in John chapter 4. In John chapter 4, Jesus speaks to her. This was a little out of the norm. It's a little awkward because, for two reasons. One is the Jews didn't speak to Samaritans. And two is in that culture, she was a woman. So in that culture, this conversation was out of the norm. Okay? But he's talking to the woman. He turns the conversation to a spiritual conversation. Jesus is tired. She's gathering water. He asks her to gather for him. And then he mentions spiritual water. Turns the conversation to a spiritual. Now, there's some hang-ups here. If you look at her past, this is a woman who had several men in her life, in her relationships. The one she was with was not hers. Yet, here's an opportunity. They were there to gather water. She leaves her water pot. She goes back into the city. And she tells the men. And she didn't have a evangelism class. She was not taught how to evangelize. She simply sees, here's a man who told me things. There's only one way he could know the things about me that he knew. She goes and tells the men. And notice what it says in John chapter 4. Verse 39. Many of the Samaritans of that city believed on him for the saying of the woman, which testified, he told me all that ever I did. Many Samaritans believed. Then, as you continue on, verse 40, so when the Samaritans were coming to him, they besought him that he would tarry with them, and he abode there many days, and many more believed because of his own word. Do you see that here was a woman who was able to invite others, and how did she invite them? Did she have a memorized sales speech? Did she have like a certain professional way of presenting the material and saying it? Was it all about how she said it necessarily? This is someone who believed in her product, and she made an invite. Some received the invitation. Others needed to hear more. They heard it from Jesus' own mouth, and that's how it happened. Now, when I think about this sales idea, when you go into a store, say for example, and the salesman walks up to you and says, "Can I help you?" What do you generally say? Why do you say that?
I don't want him to sell me something that I don't want.
You don't want to buy?
I don't want to buy necessarily what he's selling.
You're in the store.
I'm not there for couches, I'm there for a chair. I don't want to be fresh.
Ah. Now, so just because you say no to the salesperson at first, does that always mean you won't buy anything? No. Keep that in mind. You ever invite someone to a Bible study or to a worship service and they say no? Sometimes no the first time does mean no never. Sometimes. But not always. Can I give you an example of this? One day my conscience was bothering me. I didn't have the Bible studies going like I wanted. But I knew I needed to do something, okay? So I told myself I got to get out there and go knock on some doors. Now immediately somebody might make an excuse and say, well, knocking on doors don't work. Who would say that? I hear it a lot. I used to say it. I used to do it and then say, it doesn't work. I'm going to tell you, it works. I still do it. I can tell you that I don't like doing it. I don't like knocking on doors. It's nerve-wracking. You never know what to expect. It is kind of cold. It ain't necessarily the best method. I'm not going to say that. It's not the only method, but it is a method. I would say if you want to have a Bible study and you don't have anybody to study with, you can at least try it. So I go and knock on some doors, and can I tell you this though? I did this in the South. I've done it up here. Within about an hour's worth of door knocking on a Saturday morning when you can catch more people, maybe somewhere between 10 and 11 a.m., do you realize I could go to like an apartment complex that maybe, not like one that has like the where it's locked and you can't get in, you have to ring a buzzer, but one where you can reach each door. I can knock on a door for about an hour, not one door, but knock on doors. So I can usually get at least one person within an hour's worth of door knocking to agree to a Bible study. And sometimes I might get 4 or 5. Half of those might stand me up, but 1 or 2 might actually have a Bible study with me. Don't say it don't work. But anyway, one day I went out and I was knocking on doors, and the very first one said, "I've been waiting on someone to talk to." She ended up being baptized later. So the very next door, I knock on the lady's door. She says, "No, I'm not interested." But what I began to perceive is, being the neighbor of the lady next door, they talk. And whenever I would go and study with her neighbor, I kind of picked up on they were talking to each other. So what began to happen was she began to warm up to me. So I would say hi whenever I saw her, and eventually she agreed to have a Bible study with me. I'm using this as an example to say, if somebody tells you no right now, that doesn't always mean no never. Okay. Sometimes it's just a matter of warming up. Okay. If people don't know you, they don't know what to expect, they don't know what you're teaching, put yourself in their shoes. You might not say yes immediately, but you might later. So that's just a part of the way that works. Any thoughts about that?
I know a couple, they moved to this new neighborhood, and, the lady next door, she thought, why are they always so happy? What is it? By the way, she's happy, and she said, I don't find any joy, just to go through the routine every week, but they're happy. They go to church, and so she started talking to them, and now, she is now in Memphis, and she said, there's such a change in my life. I have never had this. There's a warmth, and I'm learning about how people are, and I was living this life that, oh, well, you just go and do this. And, but she tells everybody, wow, there's been such a big change in my life. And they'll let her talk, but then after that, oh, okay, I don't want to hear a no, because they don't want to change. I knew a lady, she would always ask me, what does the Bible say about this? What does the Bible say about that? And if she liked what the Bible said, she would accept it. But if she didn't like what the Bible would say, she said, oh, it's written by men anyhow. And I said, no, it isn't, and I'm trying to talk to her about always so hard. And the other day, this lady told me, she said, oh, felt like she was ready to cry. And I said, do you want to hear my thoughts about that? No, you're not happy. And that was the end.
What one person may see as a barrier, another may see as an opportunity. I used to make the excuse that if someone was involved in a church and very active, it's going to be pretty hard to try to convince them. And maybe so. But you never know what may be happening in that congregation, wherever they are. You don't know what's happening in the person's life, what they're upset about, what's bothering them, what kind of things that they're seeing as they're searching. So, if you had been Ananias and you heard about a man named Saul who was persecuting Christians, would you have went to that man and told him about Jesus being the Christ? You can understand when the Lord told him to speak to him why I heard these things about this man. But that man ended up being one of the most evangelistic men that's ever lived. So don't underestimate that.
And I do take some, you mentioned earlier about your conscience in your story about being convicted by your conscience. And just this morning, as part of my reading, I read, was reading about Gideon. And how many times in the Bible, and we all know this isn't anything revealing, but it's very convicting to think about all the people who were directly told by God or by one of his angels to do something, and they still had the audacity to, I get some comfort out of that. I don't want to excuse it, but if these people were getting direct, and I mean direct revelations from God and from angels, and we're still, can we send somebody? Gideon. I'm the least of my clan's the weakest, and I'm the weakest of my family within the clan. We've already talked about Moses. Ananias, talk to this guy Saul, I'm going to use him, and I'm going to use you. As wait a minute, because this is the same, the point being that these folks we read about in the Bible that had direct contact with God that still were like, can you send somebody else? Can you ask somebody else? I'm not worthy. Even Saul, King Saul, when they went to introduce him, he was nowhere to be found. If you relate that to a TV show or a movie, it's like, hey, we're going to introduce him, and then they put the spotlight in the center of the stage, and there's nobody there. It's like, where's Saul? He was hiding in the crowd. These people in the Bible, they struggle with the same things that we do. So, like I said, I don't say that to excuse us, but at least in Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun. So we need to make sure that we reach a point where look, this isn't going to be easy, but this is what I need to do. The world needs what I have.
Our job is to sow the seed. Some will, some won't. You keep sowing. You don't sow because it's comfortable. And it doesn't always become natural. You simply sow the seed and you get out of your comfort zone. I force myself to try. Not because it's natural. And I still am awkward at it sometimes. But don't let the awkwardness keep you from trying. Embrace the awkward. Let me give you an example. We were walking in the park, and there was a man walking away from me. He's there exercising, and he's listening to an audio book. And I interrupted his walk. I interrupted his audio book. I said something awkwardly about the weather. He pauses, and he seems aggravated. He says, hang on a second. And he pauses it, and he goes, what? And I repeated what I said again, and then he said, where are you from? I guess he heard my accent. And he said, as we began talking, that man in that awkward conversation that I interrupted ended up studying with me, and after about a year, he obeyed the gospel. He's a faithful Christian today. We study nearly every week, and he's growing. All because I took the chance. And I could have told myself, this is probably not the best way to do this. We find so many excuses and ways of doing it. I think a lot of the times we've got to get out of our own way, and we got to stop using the excuses and just try. Who hunts? Does anybody hunt? Okay. So when there was this one time, I'm in the passenger seat, a hunter's driving, and he says, see that deer? It's like 300 yards away. And I'm looking, I'm aware. And he says, it's right there. Look, here we are going like 60 miles an hour down the highway. He's driving. He's supposed to be watching the road. And I'm looking, and I don't see it. It's right there. Now tell me why he could see that and I couldn't.
Looking for it.
But I was looking for it, and I didn't see it.
It's practiced.
He's cared about that. He's invested time in that. It's something that is important to him. And he's done it again. If I can open your eyes and start looking for opportunities, if you could believe there are people out there who are interested. I used to say people aren't interested anymore. I don't say that anymore. Because whenever I make a little bit of an effort, I start to see all kinds of opportunities. There are all kinds of people out there who are interested. We just need to be opening our mouth and trying to say something. There's a lot more we can say. I appreciated your input. If you come away with this with any other thing, just don't make excuses. I'd like to encourage you. Go do something this week. If it's a call, a text, a visit, a private message, something. Some kind of an invite. Now, when you get a no, don't let that keep you from trying. Ultimately, you plant, someone else waters, God gives the increase. You're not trying to make a convert to yourself. You're just planting a seed. And even if you say something, it doesn't come out completely right. Just at least make the effort. That's the one thing I would like to leave you with, to try. And who knows what might happen. Appreciate your attention.